We heard about this ghost town through Reddit. It wasn't even that far away from where I live in Arkansas, and so I offered a few of my internet friends to join me on this trip. I would have them stay at my place for free in exchange for them cooking for the weekend. It was a great plan. I was a student at the time, so if they could provide food, I definitely didn't mind hosting them. I was part of this subreddit for horror lovers. There was a guy named Jake Saw Everything who posted about this ghost town, and instantly, a couple of guys and I got interested in it. We chatted on Discord about the pros and cons of a visit, and we agreed on a weekend. They'd arrive at my place either Friday night or Saturday morning, whichever was more convenient for them, and we'd spend the day together preparing our trip. Then we'd leave for the town. It was pretty simple. 2 of them arrived on Friday evening, long past dinner time. Greg was a 34-year-old dude from Dallas, and Michael was about my age and from Mississippi. He was borrowing his parents' car for the weekend and looked pretty average. I liked him, and I knew we would get along great. The 3 of us had a couple of beers graciously offered by Greg, and we spent the rest of the evening in my cramped living room. I let them set up camp, and we started talking about tomorrow and what our plans were. And then it got pretty late. So then I bid them a good night and I went back to my room, making sure to lock the door. I mean, hell, even if we shared a common interest, they were still strangers in my home. While I didn't think anything bad would happen to me, I preferred being safe than sorry. The next morning came and I woke up to the smell of bacon grease and eggs. Bacon is a luxury when you're a student, and so I shot straight out of bed. I barely put on my bathrobe and I joined them in the kitchen. Greg was making breakfast and said he woke up early and remembered seeing a convenience store on the way in, so he decided to grab us some eggs. I was grateful, especially since I'd been eating ramen for the past week. I went to my fridge to grab some milk for coffee and noticed that Greg filled it up with stuff. He flashed me a grin and told me not to worry about it, that he was too a student once. There was milk, eggs, bacon, cold cuts, bread. In the freezer, a couple of frozen pizzas, chicken wing boxes, and frozen veggies. I felt bad about it, but quickly forgot about the whole thing when I started eating breakfast. I wasn't going to say no to such a generous offer, especially since I was practically starving. While we ate, the last partner joined us. I was expecting a guy since their alias was Master Chief 667X, but I was pleasantly surprised to find out it was a woman. She was maybe 4 or 5 years older than me, so halfway between Greg and me. She was a bit on the curvier side, had long brown hair and beautiful brown eyes. She looked kind of normal. In fact, I guess all of us did, to be honest. I wouldn't have guessed upon glancing at any of us that we were all in love with horror so much. She sat and ate with us, and we all prepared our bags, planned our trip. In the middle of the afternoon, we packed Greg's minivan with our bags and left. Greg brought a high-quality camera for a photo shoot, but I was fine with only my phone and my wallet. The ghost town was about 3 hours away from where I lived, so that we would get there by dinner. We stopped and ate at a Joe's Deli on our way, which delayed us a little. We finally arrived at the town at around 6 or 6:30 at night. I'm not exactly certain right now. But since it was spring, the sun was still high, and it would be for at least another hour. And everyone knows the best way to explore a town is in the dark. We were surprised to see police tape all over the place. It was also a lot more barricaded than that Reddit user Jake Saw Everything was suggesting. We thought it would be easy to get in, but apparently the town was completely closed down. There was a half-broken sign on one of the doors that said, "Do not enter, government property." Of course, this wasn't going to stop us. We didn't drive 3 hours to the middle of nowhere in Arkansas to go back to my cramped apartment. but I did suggest we turn back, just for clarity. Now, I didn't believe it that much, and I definitely wanted to get behind all those fences, but I didn't want to be the one to instigate criminal stuff. Fortunately, Greg made this decision for us. He got a set of shears out of his toolbox and made quick work of that shitty aluminum fence. And with a polite ladies first, he invited us to get through the hole. He then told us he would park a little further away as to not raise suspicion, and for us to wait for him. When he came back, we started our exploration. Now, it wasn't a big town or anything. Well, maybe it was, I don't know. It was more like 50 houses. They looked brand new and abandoned, as if no one had ever lived in them. And out of curiosity, we approached one, turned the front door knob, and it wasn't locked. Holy shit, guys, it's not locked. It's creepy, Elena said as she entered the first house, then covered her nose as the scent coming from the house hit her. It smelled rancid. There was no other way to put it. There was still enough sun outside that we didn't need to pick up our flashlights yet. As we walked through the house, we found the kitchen area, while the rest of the house looked completely spotless and new. The kitchen was a nightmare. The fridge's door was wide open, and rotting food was dripping from it. There was a huge dark brown stain in the middle of the table, as well as bones on a plate. We simply assumed it was a turkey or something, and the people who had lived there had to leave, and whatever brown mess left behind was just the rotten meat. But for all the food waste and mold, there wasn't a single fly in the room. Not a single trace of anything alive in town. But with the food, it was obvious someone was here at some point. I'm not an expert on mold either, but shouldn't it kind of dry out after a few years of being abandoned? The food definitely didn't look fresh or just rotten, but it didn't look like something that had been abandoned for years. I would say weeks or months at best, but that was just my best guess. How long did they say it was abandoned for? I asked, and they all shrugged. Maybe Reddit user Jake Saw Everything hadn't provided a date, just a location. We weren't many on that subreddit. After all, barely 30, and probably a great portion of them being dead accounts. In any case, we left the house and I felt uncomfortable. Now, this is a good thing when you're a horror lover, but I didn't expect it to be so realistic. It wasn't only a ghost town. It was like the whole town had just got up and left in the middle of dinner. We entered a few more houses and the same scene appeared in the kitchen. The whole house was pristine, but the kitchen was a wasteland of toxic mold and devastation, with brown stains in the middle of the dinner table and rotting food falling from the shelves. We eventually reached what looked like a medical clinic. Unsurprisingly, it was spotless. There were still glass cabinets filled with medicine and vials all over the place. It was a druggie's dream, really. This place could be ransacked at any moment, and the dude who got away with it would make thousands out of all the stolen meds. I looked at one through the glass to see a date, and was surprised it was dated only 3 weeks ago. I tried to use my phone to check out the doctor's name, but we didn't have any phone reception there. And so I asked the group, "You guys have any internet or any bars or anything?" None of us had, despite having different providers. And then we heard a metallic noise coming from downstairs, and I jumped in surprise. It sounded like some kind of heavy door, rubbing against the frame. My heartbeat was increasing. There was just so many things unexplained about this town, and I started to realize I was in over my head. It wasn't just the ghost town. Something clearly happened here, and this place was somehow quarantined and blocked off from the world. Hence the aluminum fencing all around the town. Now, I talked a bit with Elena, and then with Michael and Greg, and we all agreed. I told them that we should head back and that we probably shouldn't be here. But Greg was having none of it. Told us that we had already trespassed and that we might as well try to figure out what happened. I admit that part of me really wanted to figure it out, so we headed downstairs toward the noise. Much to our surprise, downstairs was completely empty and dark. We used our flashlight and didn't see a single door or anything. The room looked just as clean and empty as the rest of the town. And then we heard the sound again and felt the vibration under our feet. I flashed around the floor again and saw something shiny in the upper left corner of the room and realized that there was a trap door leading to another level below. Everything was screaming at me to turn back then. And there was also another "Do not open" sign on the trap. This time, Elena was with me when I said we should really head back. But Greg, well, smiling like a child in a candy shop. And it made me feel a lot worse altogether. "I bet whatever answer we're looking for is down there," Greg said. I wish I hadn't heard that. I wish I just made a coward out of myself and dashed out of there. But I didn't. 1, because I was 3 hours away from home, and 2, because Greg was our designated driver. It's his van after all. I couldn't really leave if I didn't have any means of transport, and with my phone having no signal, I depended on this guy to get me back home. Greg decided to put his camera aside and decided to open the trap door that was clearly labeled "Do not open." The stench that was released as he opened the door was nearly enough to make me spit my roast beef sandwich from earlier. The underground was hot, stinky, and humid. A triple threat combination that just made me feel feverish upon the first draft. I coughed a couple of times and felt my eyes sting, and so did everybody else there with me. I think Elena had the hardest time. She looked pale as a ghost. I asked her if she was fine and she nodded, but it was clear that her stomach was very sensitive at that moment. She kept her hand up around her nose and mouth to try to block the scent, and I simply lifted my shirt over my nose and hoped for the best. Greg was the first one to go to the lower level. Each step I took down just made me feel worse and worse. The air was thick, heavy, and foul. It even had a taste. And the sounds of droplets hitting the concrete soon reached our ears. This place was so humid that water drops were forming on the ceiling. And it was hot. So fucking hot it felt like a sauna. There was also a lot of noise besides the droplets. I heard some steam release, the sound of engines, and a weird scratching sound. All my senses were on high alert. None of us were talking, but I could feel the tension. I could have cut it with a knife, if I had one. We started advancing down the pitch hallway, and we could barely see in front of us, even with the flashlights. The darkness was just as thick. About 2 minutes down the hallway, we heard what sounded like a growl and a series of careful steps. Several careful steps. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to turn back so bad. "Hey guys, this place is awesome. You see that?" Greg said as he flashed his flashlight toward the wall. I didn't think it was awesome. In fact, I was scared shitless. This looked straight out of a horror movie. The wall had been slashed, for lack of a better term, and there was blood all over the place. I couldn't tell if it was fresh or not, but I could smell it. "I'm turning back," I told the group, and Elena held my hand. Greg reminded me that he was the driver, and as I turned back to give him a piece of my mind, my heart stopped. Behind Greg, barely noticeable in the thick darkness, a few pairs of eyes were staring at us. I instantly paled and felt weak to my knees. The sclera was so white and the irises so red, but what bothered me the most was how these eyes seemed to have lost all focus. Like they were staring at us, but not really staring at us. I felt a scream die in my throat as it moved out of the darkness and grabbed Michael, whose flashlight conveniently decided it was time to stop working. We all heard a scream, a series of broken clicks, and the sound of his muffled breath as he was pushed to the ground. Greg flashed at the darkness, but all we could see was a mass of darkened limbs crawling all over Michael. I saw his eyes as they tore into him. They were pleading for my help. I saw his torso bend awkwardly and his body twisted in different directions. I heard the sound of his last breath as he struggled to take it, and then I heard his body break, pieces of him being torn all at the same time by dozens of darkened hands burying into him. I didn't wait for Greg or Elena or anyone else to push back toward the flight of stairs. I dashed out, followed by Elena and Greg. Nobody followed us. It was like the creatures got what they wanted with Michael. We closed the trap and ran until I felt my lungs were going to explode. We climbed back into the van and drove to the nearest town to tell the police what we saw. We were charged with breaking and entering on government property. We were eventually released. I asked about Michael, then I tried to contact Greg and Elena, but they never responded. It was almost like they vanished. The subreddit I was in was deleted. I tried to find Michael's parents on Facebook, but I couldn't find a trace of him. A year later, despite my many attempts at getting answers, I couldn't find any. I borrowed my parents' car and went back to where I was sure the town was, but it was completely gone. There was nothing there. I don't know what to do anymore, and it's eating away at me. I can't have imagined all that. I can't have imagined all those black things with those white and red eyes devouring Michael. There is one thing I forgot to mention to you all, or maybe I subconsciously forgot about it, in fear that one of you might go try to find it. I saw a cleverly hidden metal hatch going into the ground. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'll go back and try to find the answer to all of this.